do you carry that flag?
Because this is my heritage. My family fought to save their farm under this flag.
Who was working that farm? Who was working that farm?
My
family was. Who was working the farm?
They were poor. Do you know how much a slave cost back then?
America is sick of a virus, which is called racism. And by no means it's unique to the United States. However, it had the perfect conditions to thrive over there. It's a relic of slavery and the institutionalized mechanisms put in place by the white settlers in order to underline white supremacy and to optimize the economic exploitation of slave labor. The history of slavery is built on the American dream, making as much money as possible, not even hesitating to contradict its own constitution, which states all men are created equal. How the virus survived the end of the American Civil War is a very intriguing story. After the abolition of slavery in the light of the Civil War, white supremacy was especially continued in the southern United States, since the southern way of life ceased to exist, which was basically a plantation-based economy, and white people didn't want to accept this new reality. The reason why the whites were able to keep their world partly intact was because of one of the rare cases in history when the loser of a war were able to write its narrative. After the Civil War, Confederate generals and politicians weren't punished, but could continue living a normal life in the society which was more focused on keeping the fragile Union together. It was from this position they were able to create the concept of the lost cause, literally meaning that the cause of the Civil War was lost. Former veterans and people in the South started to spread the rumor that the Civil War hadn't been about slavery, but about states' rights, and therefore deflecting from the actual problem. The Southern way of life was glorified as the good old days, with chivalry, happy slaves, and the noble defeat in the war, which was only lost because the Northern states had many more soldiers. This narrative was further ingrained into the broader conscience of the American public by the installations of Confederate statues and monuments all around the country, but especially in the South. While many people argue that they were put up in order to honor the fallen soldiers, research shows that the main motivation behind it was to re-establish the former difference between superior whites and inferior blacks. This can be seen when we look at the two distinct time periods when most of the statues and monuments were actually erected. The first one was just before the First World War, when the last veterans were about to die, and the second one was when Martin Luther King, in the 1960s, was fighting for civil rights for African Americans. The same applies to Confederate street names. In 2015, when Dylann Roof killed 9 innocent churchgoers in Charleston, South Carolina, the victims had to walk on Calhoun Street to get to their church, named after John Calhoun, one of the biggest proponents of slavery in the 19th century, who said that slavery was not a necessary evil, but a positive good, actually helping slave owners and slaves alike. He even said the following: "Never before has the black race of Central Africa, from the dawn of history to the present day, attained a condition so civilized and so improved, not only physically, but morally and intellectually. It came to us in a low, degraded, and savage condition, and in the course of a few generations, it has grown up under the fostering care of our institutions." So to him, slavery had a great benefit for an inferior race that couldn't exercise its freedom in a positive way. A similar pattern can be seen with the Confederate flag, which was first embraced in the 1940s by white nationalists when President Truman was arguing for civil rights for African Americans. Moreover, the state of Georgia incorporated the Confederate battle flag into its state flag in 1956, in the light of the fight for desegregation in the American society. And in 1961, South Carolina raised the Confederate flag for the first time at its capital in Charleston. And until today, the state of Mississippi has made no efforts to actually reconsider its state flag, which to them is a sign of heritage and not a sign of slavery. And once again, all these examples show the whitewashing process of the history of the Confederacy. One of the most prominent examples of this whitewashing is the movie Gone with the Wind, which portrays all the typical characteristics of the lost cause narrative. You have the chivalry when the movie's main character, Scarlett, a southern plantation owner's young daughter, arrives at a party organized by another rich southern family.
You look mighty fine this morning, Miss Collins. Good morning, Miss Collins. Good morning.
We can find the glorification of slave labor with happy children and the portrayal of an almost idyllic ending of a long day on the working fields.
quitting time.
Who says it's quitting time?
I said it's quitting time.
I was the foreman. I was the one says when it's quitting time of terror. Quitting time!
Part of the movie takes place right before the outbreak of the Civil War, when the rich plantation owners discuss how to react to a possible confrontation with the northern states. Of course, the South is portrayed as the victim of the northern aggression, and the North is considered the evil who tries to prohibit the pursuit of happiness of the South by interfering in their internal affairs.
But like my father, I hope that the Yankees will let us leave the Union in peace.
But Ashley, they've insulted us.
You can't mean you don't want war.
Most of the miseries of the world were caused by wars. And when the wars were over, no one ever knew what they were about.
The atrocities of slave labor are rarely or not mentioned at all. The treatment of black slaves is even portrayed as more humane than the treatment of white convicts.
I do wish you'd let me hire free darkies instead of using convicts. Scarlett, I will not make money out of the enforced labor and misery of others.
You weren't so particular about owning slaves.
That was different. We didn't treat them that way.
Finally, there is a very one-sided, revisionist sense of nostalgia throughout the movie. But the following example is especially horrifying when character Ashley remembers a particular memory with his slaves.
Yes, we've traveled a long road since the old days, haven't we, Scarlett? Oh, the lazy days, the warm, still country twilight, the high, soft Negro laughter from the quarters, the golden warmth and security of those days.
And another concerning fact is that until today, Gone with the Wind is still the most successful movie of all time when adjusted for inflation. By winning the narrative, the Southern states were able to continue white supremacy, which was legalized by the so-called Jim Crow laws, which meant that you are separate but equal, and you live in a segregated society. Gone with the Wind's own Hattie McDaniel is the perfect example of the whole hypocrisy of the system. She was the first African American to win the Academy Award for the role as Mammy. A mammy is an American stereotype originating from the times of slavery, when enslaved African American women were tasked to take care of white plantation owners' kids. Once again, the movie gives us a good impression of what this stereotype looks like. An older obese woman whose main objective is to make sure that the white kids are respecting the rules of Southern society.
Why do I have to take a nap? I'm not tired.
Well brought up young ladies take naps at parties, and it's high time you start behaving yourself and acting like you was Miss Ellen's dog. Miss Scarlett, Miss Sue Ellen, you all behave yourself, acting like poor white trash children. If you're old enough to go to parties, you're old enough to act like ladies.
Who cares?
Mammy demonstrates a loyal, sassy, but ultimately non-threatening and submissive attitude, with a complete acceptance of her inferiority. She fiercely defends the distribution of roles in a slave society, even against other African Americans.
Get out of the way, kid. Get away. Walk.
While being obedient and submissive most of the time, she's shown to be sassy in order to give her a sense of agency. But she always stays under the control of her white masters.
She says she's coming. I don't know why she's coming, but she's a-coming.
You don't like me, Mammy. Now, don't you argue with me. You don't. You really don't.
The created image of the asexual, overweight African-American woman persists until today in imagery, like in the Aunt Jemima's Pancakes brand's packaging. As a direct result of the Floyd protests, the owner of the brand, Quaker Oats, has decided to remove the image from all its future products. So while being a very talented actress and singer for a long period of time, many researchers say that Hattie McDaniel won the Academy Award for this role in particular because she played a role that white people wanted black people to play. But the story gets even crazier because Hattie McDaniel had to accept the Academy Award in the Ambassador's Coconut Grove nightclub in Los Angeles, which had a strict no blacks allowed policy. They made an exception for her that night, but she had to sit all by herself at a table in the corner of the room where the award was presented, and her official spot was taken by her white agent. Later that night, all the cast members went to a nightclub not far away in order to celebrate the success of the movie. But once again, Hattie wasn't allowed entry because the nightclub had a no blacks allowed policy. When she died in 1955, her final wish was to be buried on Hollywood Cemetery on Santa Monica Boulevard in Hollywood, where all the other famous actors found their last piece. But even this last wish was denied because the owner of a cemetery had a no black policy. As we have seen, racism is not limited only to the police, which is the main focus right now. Most of the symbols representing the former South, like movies, statues, flags, street names and brands, were mostly erected, created or popularized in order to turn back time and to stop African Americans from reaching equal rights and equal opportunities. In the light of this apparently reoccurring pattern in American history, the groundbreaking election of Donald Trump in 2016 wasn't really a surprise. After 8 years of an African American president, the population fell back into a subconscious reflex to get the old days back, which is the basic appeal of the slogan, "Make America Great Again." Because when was America great? When the presidents were white? When the roles of black and white people were clearly defined? These are questions the American public has to face, because the future of the country depends on it. This is Freddy. I hope you like it. Hit like and subscribe, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.